Story 1. Say you oppose immigration, then get elected, increase immigration, and blame it on the opposition. Repeat. In the meantime, use the immigration narrative to explain rising costs while your wealthy associates deplete the country's resources, leaving nothing for the middle and lower classes. Story 2. The fault largely lies with Boris Johnson. The country was facing a recession post-COVID, and some of our smaller, younger universities were encountering a funding crisis. This was his solution to those problems. Story 3. Not even remotely surprised. Freedom of movement was not the reason for our immigration figures. The reason for our immigration figures is our economic model, which requires constant growth. With declining birth rates, immigration is filling that gap. With freedom of movement, we had a system where it wasn't a significant commitment to come here. Some came, stayed for a while, and then moved on. Now, it is a significant commitment, so people are permanently staying and bringing their families with them. Story 4. Brexit was always just an outrage campaign that politicians could run on instead of actually addressing issues. It culminated in a popular vote. Story 5. Gary Stevenson has some insightful opinions on this topic. His YouTube channel, Gary's Economics, offers valuable perspectives. Essentially, the wealthy are funding anti-immigration sentiments and policies to blame immigrants for issues caused by inequality. However, they do not genuinely want to address immigration, as allowing more people in perpetuates the system they criticize and continues to serve as a distraction. Story 6. To this day, the wildest aspect of Brexit is that it was a non-binding resolution that barely passed yet inspired immediate and extreme action with the mindset of nothing we can do now. Story 7. The Conservative Party, as a concept, runs on problems but exacerbates them when actually given the power. It is what we face repeatedly in America. The Republican Party crashes the economy, and the Democratic Party slowly digs out but gets criticized for the slow pace. The Republican Party crashes it again. They claim to be deficit hawks but worsen the deficit. They run on free speech but restrict it as soon as they are elected. They claim to be about personal freedoms but clearly do not. It is all a farce, but people have short memories. Story 8. Without checking facts or statistics and reflecting on my thoughts when the United Kingdom left the European Union, they targeted European Union immigration while completely ignoring Commonwealth immigration, which was unrelated to the European Union, and they need migrants. Companies are now sourcing them from there. Even without Brexit, many of the Eastern European migrants would have left on their own, as Eastern Europe has developed enough that it no longer makes much financial sense to move to the United Kingdom, especially London, which I never plan to visit again due to its high costs. Story 9. I believe the modern right is deceiving people. They focus on issues that are not real problems and then falsely claim they are addressing them. Story 10. I believe Brexit was a misguided idea promoted by opportunists to profit from the turmoil that would affect the United Kingdom. The general public who voted for it thought they were supporting their rights, but instead received nothing. Story 11. Brexit was a project by Cambridge Analytica, funded and designed by Russia with the intent to destabilize Europe, further worsening conditions for British people. The United Kingdom needs to rejoin the European Union while addressing the issues as best as possible. Story 12. Politicians are not held accountable for their words and promises. All issues in politics arise from this. If you make a bold promise, gain people's support, and fail to deliver, you either lack the foresight to make a realistic promise or the competence to turn it into reality. Alternatively, you may be acting dishonestly. In any case, this should not go unpunished. Story 13. I believe people were misled and accepted it completely. I want my European Union citizenship back. That is my opinion. Story 14. I believe it is easy to promise what people think they want if there is no intention or plan to deliver it. This is a basic principle of populism. Story 15. In retrospect, Brexit was another plot by Russia to destabilize the European Union and facilitate the invasion of Ukraine with less resistance. Now the United States and Russia are trying to move forward to the next country. Story 16. Oh no. One of the most anticipated and discussed consequences of Brexit has occurred. Who would have imagined? Story 17. It was obvious it would happen. Not only that, but it was clear we would receive far fewer ethnically European immigrants and more of the types that these voters specifically did not want. Regarding illegal immigrants, we had a mechanism to return them to France while we were in the European Union. That is no longer available, so it is now up to us without the European Union's assistance. Those of us who supported the European Union pointed all this out, but concern over foreign immigration seems to have resonated more. Story 18. In the United States and the United Kingdom, the primary driver of immigration is the business community. Businesses often prefer not to pay citizens fair wages, provide retirement benefits, or offer additional perks when they can hire individuals from other countries on visas. This allows them to exert pressure on these workers, even threatening deportation if they choose to strike or advocate for better conditions. The sooner we stop blaming immigrants and start examining the actions of businesses, the better off we will all be. Story 19. Not surprised. It's about the gap between promises and reality. Johnson promised everything, as he always does, but the truth is you can't curb immigration without harming the economy or run the economy without relying on inexpensive labor and minimal immigration controls. Businesses want low wages and landlords profit from overcrowding, so strong immigration controls, while necessary to keep out bad actors, conflict with their interests. The same is true for all anti-immigration parties. They will always choose immigration over a financial crash. Story 20. During the campaigning days, it was easy to portray Europeans as the enemy, draining the United Kingdom of wealth and resources, and passing laws that benefited the bloc rather than our citizens. I also believe that UK citizens had an inflated sense of trust in pro-Brexit politicians who convinced the public they were more competent than politicians from the European Union. It is significant that they have now been exposed as incompetent individuals who have never worked a day in their lives and are seen as betraying their country. Regarding migration, it is wonderful that people from other countries, like the Philippines, have the opportunity to earn higher wages here to send money home to support their families. Story 21. Can someone explain why it is hard to stop, specifically regarding the small boats? Can't we just position 10 to 12 warships in the channel to spot the boats with radar and intercept them? What is the barrier that prevents us from doing that? Story 22. The British Conservative Party is simply Labour pretending to be conservative for votes, much like moderates in the United States. The leftist elites and donor class do not particularly fear right-wingers. They fear individuals they cannot control. Take Bernie Sanders. He is quite leftist, and most of us would agree on that. However, he was undermined twice during his presidential campaign by those in power. Why? They preferred more easily controllable alternatives. Another issue that could be contributing to this is the declining birth rate, which necessitates the importation of people to fill jobs. Immigrants traditionally accept lower wages than local workers in a first-world economy. Story 23. I was against Brexit from the start, mainly because everything was pretty decent as it was. Was it perfect? No, but it was bearable. The only reason Brexit happened was due to migration, and that is because many in the United Kingdom are just racist and blame immigrants for all the issues in the country. They read that an asylum seeker committed a horrendous crime, and to them, all immigrants are criminals. They don't understand that there are criminal elements in all groups. They struggle to get a foot on the property ladder because the entire housing system is broken, but they only see that an asylum seeker got a house and they didn't. They think immigrants are stealing their jobs, but either they don't actually want to do the job themselves, as it's hard work for minimum wage, or they are not qualified enough to do the job that the immigrant is able to do, such as being a doctor. It's pretty clear that this section of the UK populace isn't actually very informed, and when politicians confirm their prejudices and promise to put an end to it, they fall for it completely. The situation is just getting worse, but immigration is not to blame. The government needs to build more houses that are publicly owned, like we had from the 1960s to the 1980s. This would allow more people to feel like they have their own homes while also providing more disposable income to reinvigorate the economy. When you see how many former council houses are now in private hands and trading for exorbitant amounts of money, it's alarming. This would obviously require a lot of workers, as houses do not build themselves, and people are needed to manage the process of getting applicants in, dealing with rent, arrears, and all sorts of property management. The same principle applies to all the core services the government privatized. Why are gas companies allowed to make huge profits? Why are executives' salaries increasing while people are struggling to keep warm? The issue is that those getting rich from public housing and the businesses that own these privatized former government services are often connected to the government. The more we blame migrants for our issues, the better it is for them. People need to look up the chain a little. Story 24. My close relative works in migration. They had a delegation from the United Kingdom to see how we, as a European Union member, handle migration. After Brexit, the United Kingdom lost access to European Union databases regarding the first country of asylum. Legally, the first country is responsible for the asylum seeker. However, if the database is not accessible, the migrant must be processed and cannot be sent back. Brexit turned the United Kingdom into a one-way street. Story 25. The wealthiest people in England decided to raise the price of labor. They wanted to support labor unions. You would have to be naive to believe that. They did it purely because it will raise prices across the board, making them more profit. When the economy suffers, the government will be forced to cut spending by removing social programs and attract investment by lowering taxes on the wealthy. Regardless of your political position, it is important to know that it is in the best financial interests of the wealthy to undermine their nations. Once you become insulated from the problems of a place, how can you be trusted to address those issues? If they wanted to demonstrate goodwill, they could empower those who face these challenges, but they do not. They simply proceed to exploit the vulnerable while they are down. Additionally, the United Kingdom was not merely part of the European Union. They were essentially granted honored guest status. They received far more than they contributed while being a wealthy nation. Retaining their own currency provided them with an ideal trade position, while also allowing them to influence how the euro was utilized. Surrendering that was indeed irrational. Story 26. I think it was fairly obvious from the beginning that most of the people advocating for Brexit were not truthful. What was it, 350 million per week for their National Health Service? Yes, how is that going? Story 27. Go subscribe to Gary's Economics. The oligarchs want everyone to blame and focus on the migrants while they continue to hoard wealth. Story 28. A few details. 1. Immigration to the UK was not primarily from European Union countries. It was from Commonwealth countries. This is why there are significant Sri Lankan, Indian, and Pakistani communities. Since the legacy of the empire is often untouchable, there is little incentive to address this issue. Immigration is necessary for the upper classes to keep job prices down, similar to the H-1B visa in the United States. If a worker's ability to stay in the country depends on their job, someone with British nationality can negotiate for better conditions or raises. In contrast, an immigrant whose work permit relies on maintaining their job will be more cautious when asking for raises or improved conditions. This situation resembles the H-1B workers in the United States, where local tech workers are replaced with immigrants who may be less likely to unionize. They will hesitate to demand higher pay, knowing that getting fired could mean returning to their home country. Story 29. I think it's more proof that democracy is broken. But that's just my opinion. I'm sure someone more intelligent than I will explain how I am wrong and that this is exactly what voters want. Story 30. I believe we have been misled, and that everyone who voted to leave should be marked so we know exactly who to hold accountable for the current situation we are facing. Story 31. Anti-immigration parties will not solve the issues because it is their only selling point. If they resolve the problems, they would risk losing the next election. Increasing the number of immigrants is central to their narrative, allowing them to claim they are hindered by external factors from implementing necessary immigration reforms, which justifies their call to try even harder next time. This cycle continues with no real resolution to the immigration issue. A similar situation occurs in the United States, where some political parties obstructed the immigration reform bill because it would eliminate their main policy arguments. Story 32. All of Brexit was a complete deception. We were misled. This was expressed at the time, but hindsight is harsh. Story 33. I believe we conveyed our message clearly. Right-wing politics is harmful. We shared this insight with America, and it has embraced all the negative influences it could find. Now, it is very ill as well. Story 34. Both the official and various unofficial campaigns for Brexit were free to make any claims they wished, knowing that, because they were not formally associated with the ruling Conservative Party or any other party, they would not be held accountable. It is generally regarded as true that the official Brexit campaign expected to lose narrowly, and the leading figures were predominantly interested in self-promotion for their own political ends. They achieved this by aligning themselves with populist talking points, expecting that it was all merely rhetoric. Story 35. The campaign was based on lies. Who could have said this? Definitely not me or that misleading advertisement. Jokes aside, this division in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and Europe has been in the works for a long time. Story 36. Well, it is clearly a betrayal. On the positive side, if you are paying attention, there is a valuable lesson about democracy from the ruling elites. Story 37. The fake conservatives are traitors for what they did to the United Kingdom. That's why more than 51% of their voters abandoned them between 2019 and 2024. They betrayed their own voters on the single most important political issue, and they did it in broad daylight. Arguably, the world's oldest political party committed electoral suicide. It was bewildering to watch. Story 38. The people who voted for Brexit are going to argue that the number is false and then bring up other irrelevant points. You are not going to receive a good faith answer here. Story 39. Because the party in power when Brexit was executed didn't truly believe in it. The referendum was called by David Cameron in an attempt to stop losing Conservative votes to the UK Independence Party. It worked, but he didn't expect Leave to actually win, breaking his promise to implement it. Then we were led by Theresa May, a reluctant supporter of leaving the European Union. She never truly believed in Brexit but felt she needed to press ahead for the sake of democracy. Theresa May made a deal that restricted her successor's actions, so when we finally got the prime minister we wanted, Boris Johnson, he was unable to truly implement it. However, despite ostensibly saying all the right things, Boris turned out to be ineffective. While we technically achieved Brexit, we didn't accomplish much with it. We were supposed to eliminate European Union laws that didn't suit us, but that never happened. Boris then married a woman who influenced him while simultaneously increasing legal immigration considerably. It was ironic. We finally had the power to control our own borders on our own terms, but we failed to use that power and chose to import hundreds of thousands of people without building the infrastructure to support them. Consequently, house prices soared, and employment became increasingly competitive. We are now in a situation where no one is happy. Supporters of remaining in the European Union are unhappy because they lost their right to live and work elsewhere. Supporters of leaving are unhappy because we largely have Brexit in name only. Story 40. Running a country is relatively straightforward. Tax billionaires and millionaires heavily, provide worker compensation to reduce the tax burden on the middle class, and then limit immigration and cheap labor for businesses, requiring them to hire citizens. Canada faces a similar issue. It is challenging for working-class individuals. While those with limited liability companies or incorporated entities are taxed less and can write off expenses, we grant permanent residency liberally and allow permanent residents to bring in elderly parents, which strains our healthcare and public service systems. In Canada, we had a political debate where immigration, migrant work permit scams, and other significant issues were not addressed at all. People need to speak out against billionaires, immigration policies, and the outsourcing of work. Story 41. I do not have a problem with migration and would be happy to see more of it. It is absolutely amusing to see the reactions of those who supported Brexit. Story 42. The reality of migration is that it often functions like a revolving door. When individuals arrive for a short-term purpose, they depart once that purpose has ended. If a barrier is imposed at the border, those coming for short-term reasons cannot leave as easily, resulting in them staying. Story 43. I think they promised many unrealistic things they had no intention of delivering. Additionally, when you leave the European Union, many matters are reclassified as immigration. Story 44. The situation you described highlights a significant contradiction between the promises made during the Brexit campaign and the reality of migration patterns after Brexit. Many proponents of Brexit argued that leaving the European Union would allow the United Kingdom to regain control over its borders and reduce migration. However, the increase in migration since Brexit, especially from non-European Union countries, illustrates the complexities of immigration policy and the global dynamics at play. Several factors could be contributing to this rise. 1. Non-European Union migration. After leaving the European Union, the United Kingdom is no longer bound by European Union freedom of movement rules, so migration from the European Union has slowed, while migration from non-European Union countries has increased. This may be due to new policies allowing skilled workers, students, and others to enter under a points-based immigration system. Labor shortages. The United Kingdom has faced labor shortages in sectors like agriculture, healthcare, and hospitality, which has led to an increase in migration from non-European Union countries to fill these gaps. This was not fully anticipated by some Brexit supporters. Global events. Factors such as the war in Ukraine and political instability in certain regions have led to an influx of refugees and asylum seekers to the United Kingdom, further adding to migration numbers. In essence, the reality of migration after Brexit is more complex than initially suggested. The idea of reducing migration does not always align with economic needs, which rely on a certain level of immigration to sustain industries and services. It highlights that immigration policy is not just about controlling numbers, but also about addressing economic, social, and geopolitical factors. This gap between promise and reality may lead to criticism, as it challenges the assumptions that Brexit would automatically deliver the immigration reductions it promised. Story 45. It seems that any populist stance is filled with lies and confusion. You cannot reduce migration when a country needs individuals to fill minimum wage jobs. Story 46. High European Union migration issues and Brexit were always exaggerated claims. Brexit was essentially about leaving a larger customs union to facilitate deregulation and other legal reductions. One does not stop being a member of something like the European Union to make certain rules stricter. The number of European Union-born residents across all countries before the referendum was consistently below 4 million. Legal migration numbers from other countries that require a visa have always been a potential concern, particularly if one believes immigrants are the cause of all problems. These numbers have been steadily increasing. We have always had control over these applications, and it has nothing to do with Brexit. The vast majority of these individuals are coming to the United Kingdom to work for specific reasons where they are needed. However, we could easily refuse their entry, but it is too costly in both time and money to wait until a local can or is willing to do the same work. Story 47. We thought of you in a lighter version than we see the United States now. You all were in a tough situation. It was a poor decision to leave, in my opinion. We could accomplish so much more together. Story 48. Brexit has consistently demonstrated itself to be one of the most misguided decisions made by a conservative politician in decades. There are many options to consider, but this was absurdly foolish, even for them. Story 49. Vote for Odin. He promised to destroy the Titans. Do you see any Titans around? No, really. You vote for clowns and you get a circus. I mean, what was the plan? Story 50. I'm not up to date, but couldn't an 80% increase in migration simply be due to people in the UK who would have previously not counted as migrants now being counted as migrants? For example, people from France or Germany. Story 51. Brexit was effectively a free clout button for a number of politicians. None of them expected it to actually work. They just wanted to create outrage and gain political points to trade with their opposition. None of them anticipated it would happen. Immediately after it did, every front-runner of the campaign slipped away. David Cameron resigned because he refused to lead the United Kingdom down this path. Now the United Kingdom is only just starting its recovery as we negotiate trade, travel, and basically everything we lost from Brexit. The future is looking up, but it's a steep hill and going to be a difficult climb with factions of our government forming very loud minorities. Story 52. They lied. Immigration was increased intentionally by those who benefit from importing new constituents. They could stop it today just as they could have yesterday or a year ago. Story 53. Lie about a problem when based on a campaign to fix that problem enact policies that actually cause that problem, get voted out because the problem is worse, and then run a campaign based on fixing a problem that you created while blaming it on your opposition. The masses have short memories, so they will believe you. Rinse and repeat. Story 54. Europeans left and Asians came in large numbers instead. At least that's my observation in Italian food establishments. Italy, Mercato Metropolitano, and Seven Dials are all currently run by Indian managers. It used to be Italians in charge. I suppose ultimately they are looking for cheaper labor. Story 55. All I could find on my own about this non-resource claim were things like this. It seems what those Brexit proponents really meant was brown people on boats. Not much more. Story 56. It's as if some politicians misled the public to undermine the European Union without ever being fact-checked on their absurd claims. Story 57. Brexit and the Leave campaign were built on falsehoods. Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nigel Farage both have interests in Europe, and there was no evidence that Brexit could deliver on its promises. Story 58. Both parties need immigrants to provide inexpensive labor to their wealthy employers. It is straightforward, and I truly do not understand how people fail to see it. Who benefits most from inexpensive labor? Is it you, the citizen? No, then who could it possibly be? Story 59. Britain has a significant problem where it is seen as socially unacceptable to oppose immigration. This perception contributes to the wealthy getting richer through cheap labor, while the rest of the population becomes poorer without taking action. No country in the world allows unlimited immigration, yet the United Kingdom is bringing in people in record numbers and expressing pride in this situation. Until ordinary citizens and mainstream media voice their concerns about wealthy elites undermining them through mass immigration, no changes will occur. Story 60. Politics is a business model where promises are made but rarely kept. Blame is shifted to others, and the cycle continues. The real trick is to keep people occupied with arguments over immigration, distracting them from those who are profiting from the chaos. Story 61. Anti-immigration politicians have no reason to lower immigration. They have found their platform one of the few that resonates. If anything, they will work hard to raise the numbers because it is their only winning move. It has never been about refugees. Story 62. Most pro-Brexit promises were either broken due to a lack of consideration for their ramifications or were outright lies from the start. Story 63. I believe that those in favor of Brexit were misguided. There should be laws to hold politicians and other leaders accountable for their claims and lies, as currently, the way to succeed in politics is to blatantly lie, since there are no consequences for dishonesty. Story 64. It makes it feel like Brexit was a significant waste of time, effort, and money for no good reason other than for select politicians who stand to gain by blaming everything on others. This situation resembles what we are witnessing in the United States right now. It represents the worst form of democracy, which is something we should avoid if we truly believe in it. However, we are currently experiencing gutter politics. Story 65. It's exactly the same as with Trump. Some politicians make promises they can't fulfill, yet many people are naive enough to believe them and vote for them, plunging their entire country into a sea of problems they didn't have before. There are no easy solutions. If someone promises you an easy solution for a complex issue, it most definitely won't work or might even make things worse. And especially don't believe single-issue politicians. The one anti-immigration politician who only gets elected because he promises to stop immigration, why should he solve the very issue that got him elected? It is the only reason he is in power. Story 66. I believe there was an exodus following Brexit. It is possible that the rate is higher than before to compensate for this while fewer foreigners are present. Feedback loops are often present in situations like this, which makes it complicated. Historically, politicians have struggled to manage migration, which tends to reflect economic realities more than anything else. Story 67. I think the voters need to learn to recognize a con artist before we end up with King Nigel in a few years. Story 68. I think people need to start taking accountability and agency in how they inform themselves. Critical thinking is an endangered skill. What is happening in America right now is already occurring at a smaller scale here. Story 69. Not knowing much about the European Union, what does one have to do with the other? Were leaders like Angela Merkel and her supporters in favor of Brexit? She was a strong advocate for bringing in immigrants to supposedly boost the German economy, similar to the situation in the United Kingdom. Story 70. I always thought Brexit was unwise from the start, and this is a predictable outcome. Just more lies from individuals who do not care about you. Story 71. This is easy. Fascism is an ideology of contradictions. What is happening right now is a good case for not just reforming the party in the United Kingdom but anywhere in Europe where pro-Russian sentiments exist. Starting with Nigel Farage to Marine Le Pen and Giorgia Meloni, they have all been pro-Russian. They tend to support whichever way the political winds blow. Story 72. The civil service is overwhelmingly anti-Brexit and has been sabotaging any attempts to cut immigration, regardless of which party is in power. Very few of these individuals were pro-Brexit. Therefore, it is not surprising that the figures have risen dramatically. Story 73. In a surprise to no one, politicians lie to get elected. It's the cycle of life. Consume the lies, elect them, and get disappointed. Consume the new lies, elect them again or a new group, and face disappointment once more. Story 74. So after all the talk about taking back control, the United Kingdom now has even more migration than before? It seems like Brexit was just a really expensive way to make things worse. Maybe next time, people should listen to experts instead of politicians making big promises they cannot keep. Story 75. The people who were pro-Brexit were dishonest. It was always clear that the exact opposite of everything they claimed would happen would occur. Story 76. Brexit was the Trump movement of Britain, characterized by a prideful and uncooperative attitude that impresses the uninformed while punishing them and others as well. Story 77. The United Kingdom needs to come back and join their European counterparts. We need each other in order to repair the broken world order. Now is the time, United Kingdom. Story 78. Conservatives are misleading, and it is genuinely amusing that people still believe what they say. Story 79. Nothing much has changed for me. I remember seeing all the promises made by pro-Brexit politicians and thinking there is no way they can deliver any of that. They are literally just lying. Now I see Reform doing exactly the same thing, claiming they will do things that are impossible to appear like the party for you. It is easy to be popular if you just lie. Just look at the former president. He literally wrote the book on it. I would like to see some of these people face consequences for their actions, but there do not seem to be any repercussions. They simply deny their promises and then wait a few days. Shout, "Look out! There is a pandemic behind you," and everyone will forget about it in a day or two. Story 80. Boris Johnson admitted it was intentional because he wanted to suppress wages. He should receive the death penalty for treason, but Tony Blair put an end to that when he was Prime Minister. Story 81. Brexit was always a pro-Russian policy that British right-wing politicians promoted by using the populist anti-immigrant narrative. Story 82. It's almost as if open borders reduce the amount of permanent immigration, as people are more comfortable moving through countries in search of work or homes. Who would have thought? Aside from every study on this for the past 2,000 years. Shocking. Story 83. Push them back out to sea with a stick or use them as target practice for the Navy. Eventually they'll understand immigrants and politicians, that is. Story 84. There is no breakdown of what migration means. However, one should not let facts interfere with criticizing or belittling the other side. There is a reason that comebacks and insults belong to children, not adult discussions. Story 85. You do not have pro-Brexit politicians in charge. The people voted to leave even if it was a small minority. If you wanted fewer people crossing by boats, then the Rwanda plan would have worked, or you need a leader willing to leave the Human Rights Convention. Story 86. What do I think? It is a colossal waste of time, money, and energy. There are all the obvious trolls and bots in the online comment sections of newspapers and social media, repeating the same nonsense day after day. It is the same strategy at work in America. Story 87. I am shocked that the individuals who believed every issue had a simplistic solution were incompetent in achieving their goals. I am truly shocked. Story 88. This reminds me of a song I'd like to share about Brexit called "A Few Steps Down the Wrong Road" by The Tangent. This song is about the rise of populist rage-based politics that led to Brexit, or maybe not Brexit after all. Stick around for the end. It tells an important story I'm trying to spread as far as I can right now. Selected lyrics, prose in italics. Asterisk, there once was a country. At a notable point in its history, it had been at the center of a large and powerful empire. As time passed, the might of that empire dwindled and faded away. Its people would sometimes wistfully look back at the time when their forefathers controlled large parts of the world. Asterisk, give us empire. Give us what our fathers fought for. Give us money. Give us power. Give us greed. This world is ours. We're the masters of its future. Won't share the fruits, just spit out the seeds. Asterisk, for generations, though successive governments and administrations continued with traditions, pomp, and ceremony, the working people of that country were ignored and left to suffer. They became restless to be the controllers again, rather than the controlled. Highly supported by the popular press, there rose from the rank and file a man who offered freedom from rules and restrictions. He could deliver the tremendous power of the country back to the hands of its people. To do this, he focused on the people he said were bleeding the country dry. Asterisk, give us freedom, give us control of our borders. Give us safety from invaders and from fear. Give us leaders who can harbor those emotions. Give us national pride and they'll all disappear. Eject those who don't have the right background, and rank people on a score of 1 to 10. But give us cheap labor to make our city's future, and make our nation great again. Asterisk, rather than look at the way they had been overlooked and deceived by the political elite, they now had someone they could reach and blame. Immigrants on the corners of the streets, on the trains in the morning. The easily accessible targets were turned into priority one. So when the country was invited to make a huge political decision about their future, any way they could vote to rid themselves of these migrants seemed the very best way to progress and regain the empire they had lost. Asterisk, and it's all ours and we don't want to share it. It's all ours and we're taking it back. It's all ours, you've just got to wear it. It's time to start following those railway tracks. Back home. Asterisk, not worrying about the consequences, not worrying about the people, money, or the future, they signed the deal. Asterisk, give me what I want. I've got no time for you. I'm the one who's got the conch, and so my words must be true. Seeing my country in this dreadful state, we need to do something, and I just can't wait. Asterisk, large groups of semi-uniformed thugs gloated in their victory, and those people from other parts of Europe were heckled, hectored, and harassed. The word traitors was used to describe those who voted against the decision made. The country was, putting it mildly, a few steps down the wrong road. Asterisk, just days after the decision was made. The new leaders sat down together and began to talk about how they would make good on the pledges they had made. It is very easy to promise you will rid the country of a migrant problem, somewhat more difficult to deliver it. The new leader looked over the top of his reading glasses around the table at his new government. I think this one is seriously important, he said at length. As such, I would like you to handle it. He looked over at Heinrich Himmler. Asterisk, well, where did you think I was going with that? Asterisk, thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.